A Florida woman is making headlines again after she shot and killed her neighbor during an argument about children playing loudly in their neighborhood. The shooting happened when the woman fired her gun through her own front door, claiming she felt threatened. According to her version of events, the mother of four was banging on her door and making death threats, which is why she pulled the trigger. Now serving a prison sentence that will keep her locked up for at least 20 years, she's dealing with legal action from the victim's family. They've filed a wrongful death lawsuit against her, but here's the twist. She wants to fight back with her own lawsuit. She's claiming that the victim's children have damaged her reputation through false statements, and she wants to sue them for defamation. This case has gotten so much attention that Netflix featured it in their documentary series. Coming up, we'll explain what's happening with these lawsuits and what the legal outcome might look like. We'll be joined by the attorney representing the deceased woman's estate to get their perspective on this complicated situation. A case that was already making national news has just gotten even more complicated. The woman who was found guilty of killing her neighbor has filed a handwritten legal response to a lawsuit brought against her by the victim's family. Even though a jury convicted her of manslaughter, she's still insisting that what she did was self-defense. For clarity, we'll be referring to the shooter by her last name throughout this story. Let me take you back to what happened that night. The incident became the subject of a Netflix documentary that spent weeks at the top of the streaming charts. The footage from that night is difficult to watch. Here's what we know from witness accounts. On June 2nd, 2023, a 35-year-old mother of four went to confront her neighbor at her apartment door. She was knocking loudly and asking the woman to come outside and talk to her. The reason? The neighbor had apparently confiscated the woman's son's tablet and had even thrown a roller skate at the child. The neighbor claimed the kids were trespassing on her property, but instead of opening the door to have a conversation, the woman inside fired a single gunshot through her closed and locked door. The bullet struck the mother in the chest, killing her. When emergency calls started coming in about the shooting, police were actually already heading to that location. That's because the shooter had called them just minutes earlier, saying she felt unsafe because of children playing in a field near her home. When officers arrived at the scene, many of them recognized the address immediately. The woman had contacted law enforcement repeatedly about the neighborhood children playing outside near her apartment. In previous encounters, deputies had tried to explain to her that as long as the children weren't actually on her property, they had every right to play in the common areas. Officers had even encouraged the kids to keep playing outside, telling them it was better than being glued to their phones all day. Officers had advised the children that if the woman started yelling at them, they should find an adult rather than engage with her. During these previous encounters, deputies tried to explain to the woman that she couldn't control who used the parking lot or common areas. While she felt strongly about keeping the children away, they actually lived in the neighborhood, just across the street. The reality was that she didn't have the authority to ban kids from shared spaces, and officers noted that she was the only resident who ever complained about them. Law enforcement had been called to deal with tensions between these two neighbors at least 6 times in the months leading up to the fatal incident. But there wasn't much police could actually do beyond taking reports and reminding the kids to keep the noise down. Despite what the shooter believed, the grassy area near her apartment wasn't her private property, so the no trespassing signs she posted didn't carry any legal weight there. A few days after the mother's death, and following multiple police interviews, the shooter was arrested and charged with manslaughter involving a firearm. She maintained from the beginning that the victim and her children had threatened her life, though witnesses contradicted this claim. None of them reported hearing any threats. When the case went to trial in 2024, it didn't take long for the jury to reach their decision. After just a couple of hours of deliberation, they returned with a guilty verdict. The judge handed down a 25-year prison sentence, and she remains incarcerated. But the legal battle isn't over yet. Several months after the criminal trial concluded, the victim's mother filed a civil wrongful death lawsuit on behalf of her daughter's estate. This lawsuit targets not only the shooter, but also names a second defendant, the property manager who oversaw the apartment complex where both women lived. This property manager had apparently received numerous complaints from the shooter about children playing near her unit. She had pressured him to install no trespassing signs, which he did along her property line. However, he had no control over the shared grassy area where the kids often played. The victim's mother outlined in her lawsuit exactly what happened that day in 2023 and explained why she believes the shooter should face financial consequences for her actions. The lawsuit also takes aim at the property manager. According to the legal filing, he had responsibility for the apartment complex and was fully aware of the ongoing problems. The complaint states that he knew about the repeated false reports the shooter had been making to law enforcement about the victim and her children. The lawsuit argues that the property manager either knew or should have known that the shooter posed a danger to others. By not taking action, he allegedly allowed a hazardous situation to continue, putting the victim and her family at risk of harm. The victim's mother is seeking compensation for several types of damages. This includes the emotional trauma experienced by the children who lost their mother, the medical costs from that tragic night, funeral expenses, and the income their mother would have earned to support them over the years. Now here's where things take an unexpected turn. The convicted woman has actually written a response to this lawsuit herself, from prison. She's not working with a lawyer on this. She personally handwrote a letter to the court, and she's not just defending herself. She's trying to launch her own lawsuit against the victim's family. In her written statement, she sticks to the same story she's been telling all along, that she had to shoot because she believed her own life was in danger. Her handwritten response makes several claims. She insists that the victim and her children were trespassing despite warning signs on the property. She says the victim shouted threats at her while on her property. She points out that deputies had previously told the victim and her children to stay away from that area. She describes the victim's behavior that night as aggressive, saying she wasn't knocking calmly, but was instead pounding on the door and shouting obscenities. She also addresses the incident with the roller skate, claiming that the child initially said he was hit by it, but later told prosecutors that it only came close to him without making contact. It's worth noting that the assault and battery charges related to the earlier incidents were ultimately dropped. None of the victim's children actually took the witness stand during the criminal trial, though they did speak with investigators and participated in pretrial questioning with lawyers. In her handwritten response, the convicted woman points out what she sees as inconsistencies in the children's accounts. She notes that the kids gave different descriptions of where they were when the shooting occurred, with one saying they were more than 60 feet away at the mailboxes. She also brings up an earlier incident that she's mentioned repeatedly, claiming that the victim once threw a yard sign at her during one of their many confrontations. According to her letter, a young witness testified that they saw the victim throw a metal sign that hit her in the leg. She adds that this happened just 7 weeks after she'd had neck surgery. The letter references another young person who gave testimony, claiming this person said the victim would come onto the sidewalk near her patio and threaten to fight her. She suggests the victim was trying to intimidate her into stopping her calls to law enforcement. She also mentions testimony stating that one of the children had thrown a water bottle at her. Based on all of this, she's now demanding to file her own lawsuit against the victim's children for damaging her reputation, seeking more than $50,000 in damages. She's also targeting the property manager in her counterclaim, arguing that he failed to properly secure the property and allowed what she describes as harassment, threats, and emotional distress to continue. To help us understand what happens next, we're speaking with the attorney representing the victim's estate. When asked about this handwritten court filing, the attorney acknowledged that at least she responded to the lawsuit. He explained that when people represent themselves in court without a lawyer, it can sometimes be challenging to get them to follow proper legal procedures. Interestingly, he received her letter at his office before it was even filed with the court. Once he confirmed that she had also sent it to the judge, he was relieved that it was officially entered into the court record as her legal response. This means the case can now move forward through the proper channels. Now that she's officially responded, the case can progress to the next stage where both sides gather evidence. This means the attorney can formally question the convicted woman under oath, along with the property manager and any other relevant witnesses. He expressed satisfaction that the legal process is finally moving forward. Regarding her dual approach, both defending herself and threatening to sue, the attorney said he hopes she's able to present whatever defenses she believes she has. If she decides to hire a lawyer to help her make her case more effectively, he wishes her well in finding one. As for the specific claims in her handwritten letter, He's choosing not to comment in detail at this stage. However, he did note that her response has given him valuable insight into how she's thinking about the case and what her strategy might be. Since the litigation is still active, there are limits on what he can discuss publicly. He's already exchanged some evidence with the property manager's attorney and doesn't want to compromise the strength of that evidence by revealing too much now. He emphasized that he's discussed the substance of the case with his client, the victim's family. While the convicted woman has every right to present her defenses in court, he believes the case will ultimately be decided on its factual merits, and he's confident the family has the stronger legal position. When asked why the family felt it necessary to file this civil lawsuit, the attorney explained that his job is to examine whether negligence played a role in what happened. The criminal case resulted in a conviction which addressed the criminal aspects. But to ensure full accountability under the law, there's also a civil component. He believes accountability should extend beyond criminal punishment to include civil consequences for wrongdoing. Based on his investigation, he and his client have developed a legal theory about how both the shooter and the property manager were negligent in this situation. That's why both are named in the lawsuit. The complaint was filed according to standard legal procedures, laying out the basic facts and legal claims in a straightforward manner. The attorney's main goal right now is simply to let the evidence speak for itself and allow the case to be decided based on facts. He's pleased that the legal process is now in motion and can move forward properly. Once more evidence comes to light through the discovery process, he'll be able to speak more openly about the details. When asked about the property manager's response to the lawsuit, the attorney confirmed that yes, he has received it. He pointed out that since this is all public record available through the county court system, there's no secret about the fact that the property manager's lawyer has filed an answer. The two sides have already begun exchanging information and evidence. Looking ahead, he's eager to continue gathering facts through the discovery phase. He's particularly interested in conducting formal depositions, sitting down to question both the convicted woman and the property manager under oath, since they're the defendants. There are also other witnesses whose testimony he wants to obtain. He's letting the facts guide the case wherever they lead, but he's genuinely excited to keep pushing forward. As he mentioned earlier, when someone represents themselves in court without legal training, it can sometimes slow down the entire process of gathering evidence and moving the case along. Shifting to a more personal note, when asked how the victim's family is coping, the attorney said they're doing about as well as can be expected under terrible circumstances. The holidays are especially painful when you've lost someone who is at the heart of your family. These four children no longer have their mother, and they have to face every holiday without her. It's an ongoing struggle that affects them every single day. Each child had their own unique bond with their mom and is processing the loss in their own way. The children's grandmother, who has stepped in to hold the family together, is facing an enormous challenge. Some days are better than others, but it's genuinely a day-to-day journey. They're simply trying to get through each day as best they can. The worldwide attention from the Netflix documentary has added another layer of complexity to their grief. The grandmother is working hard to shield her grandchildren from all the public scrutiny and media coverage surrounding the case. The oldest child is now a teenager, which brings its own complications. At that age, the teen is likely active on social media and may come across comments and discussions about the case. The grandmother's primary focus has been protecting all the children from negative attention and hateful comments online. She's working hard to maintain a positive environment within the family, but it's incredibly difficult when there's so much public discussion happening. Everyone seems to have an opinion about the Netflix documentary and what happened, and those opinions get shared freely online. From the grandmother's perspective, her main job right now is keeping a protective barrier around these kids so they don't have to see all the harsh commentary and judgment from strangers on the internet. When asked whether the family had any objections to the documentary being made or the story being told publicly in that format, the attorney said he's not aware of any objections they raised about the production. Looking ahead to what might happen next in the legal case, the attorney explained that his role is focused on the civil side of things. What he really wants to communicate, both in court and to the public, is the magnitude of what these children have lost and what they're going through. The relationship they had with their mother and the void left by her death is the most devastating part of their young lives. He can't imagine being 4 years old or 9 or 13 and having to face life without a mother. One of the most important aspects of his work is making sure people understand that these are children experiencing ongoing trauma. Their emotional pain, their stress, their daily struggles, none of it can be fixed. No amount of money from a lawsuit will bring their mother back. No prison sentence for the shooter will undo what happened. Even therapy and counseling, while helpful, can't fully heal the wound of losing a parent so violently and suddenly. He doesn't live with them day to day, but he hears their stories through their grandmother, who does her best to help him understand the full scope of their suffering. He needs to grasp these details because eventually he'll have to present them in a courtroom. But it's an evolving situation. These children are going through something incredibly difficult, and their pain continues every single day. He's uncertain when, or if, the family will ever find complete closure. The criminal conviction did provide one form of resolution, closing that particular chapter. His hope is that the civil case will offer another sense of closure, allowing them to move forward. Eventually, the intense public attention may fade. The media will likely shift focus to other stories, and perhaps then these children won't have to live under such a spotlight or deal with constant negative commentary from strangers. It's truly heartbreaking to consider what these children are going through. Losing a parent at such a young age is traumatic enough, but losing a mother in such a violent and public way, followed by a highly publicized trial and now a Netflix documentary that keeps the story in the public conversation, makes it exponentially worse. The family deserves sympathy and support as they navigate this unimaginable situation. One additional concern for the children: since the legal case is still in its early stages, there's a possibility they could be called to testify at the civil trial. The attorney acknowledged this as possible, though he noted that judges typically have discretion over whether minors testify. In the criminal trial, none of the children took the witness stand, yet the jury still reached a guilty verdict. This suggests the evidence was strong enough without requiring testimony from traumatized children. Given that outcome, he believes the evidence in the civil case should also be clear without putting the kids through additional trauma. However, the convicted woman could potentially call them as witnesses for her own defense. She does have that legal right. The attorney pointed out that law enforcement footage shows one of the children was present and witnessed their mother's final moments. That child could potentially describe what they experienced and saw, which would certainly demonstrate the emotional damage they've suffered. If the defense wants to explore that testimony, they'll have to work through the appropriate legal procedures to determine whether it's appropriate for court. At the heart of everything is a simple truth: this tragedy should never have happened in the first place. When examining a preventable death, the question becomes one of responsibility. Who bears the blame? The shooter, obviously. But what about law enforcement who responded to numerous calls? The attorney noted they haven't filed any claims against police. What about the property manager? They believe he shares some responsibility, which is why he's named as a defendant in the lawsuit. The goal moving forward is to let all the evidence come to light, regardless of what information emerges or from whom, and ensure the case is decided based on its factual merits. As this case continues to develop, there will certainly be more to the story. It remains to be seen whether the convicted woman will continue representing herself from behind bars or eventually hire legal representation as the case moves forward. We'll have to wait and see if she continues to file her own court documents or takes a different approach to her defense. What matters most, though, is recognizing the immense pain this family continues to endure. They deserve compassion and support as they work through this incredibly difficult period in their lives.